Okay, well, here would be my argument for
Your
abortion.
turn.
And that would be,
Okay.
if God does not exist, then the idea of human rights is a comforting myth. There is nothing special about you or me. You are just a kind of collection of atoms and things. And therefore, one of the things we should be most interested in is the flourishing of human societies. And since there are no intrinsically evil things, since there is no moral lawgiver, we should be mainly concerned with actions that, as I say, lead to the flourishing of societies. And I could see an argument for why that might be the case, that killing some of them, live or preborn, so postborn or preborn, could be conducive to that, even if they're innocent. And if you say, well, but do you want to live in a world where human life can be so disposable? I'd say, well, maybe. I'm open to the argument. So I think if God doesn't exist, then we need to cool it a little bit on the whole abortion topic. What do you think?
So it's utilitarianism, ultimately. Whatever I choose the utility to be for what is my sort of definition of what's best for society. And I can say we can play that game. Get a group of people in the room. Can you all agree on what the best utility or what the best, who should have the rights or who don't deserve the rights? And, any time in history that's been done, where instead of universal human rights for all, and we're all equal in dignity, and there's a moral code that requires us to behave justly towards one another. Anytime that's been broken, that system's been broken, then we see genocides happen. It's like the Holocaust happened, the Rwandan genocide happened, slavery happened. So I would just, sit down and talk you through, okay, let's follow your argument to its logical conclusion. You tell me, Mr. Utilitarian, what your standards for human life should be. What are your invented and ever-changing human rights that you accept, and then I'll explain to you why that's unfair and unjust, because it will always end up being unfair and unjust.
I think that's a really good answer, and I think that would really help the person to sort of reflect upon this, even from a utilitarian point of view, in fact. But I don't think it works. Like, I don't think what you're saying is convincing, because if I'm a true relativist, if I'm a sort of like Raskolnikov in the beginning of Crime and Punishment, then my standards of who gets to live and who doesn't might change. And I might even think the Holocaust was a decent thing, or at least not as bad as you're making it out to be.
But then it's a will to power. I mean,
Fine,
your
don't
standards
care.
will... it's really, as long as you're powerful enough to be the one to set the standard. What happens when you become too weak to set the standard and someone else sets it for you?
Then they can kill me. That's fine. Like, that's the answer.
And I think the good news is most people on a natural survival status, they realize, I'm going to be old at some point in my life. I'm going to be sick at some point in my life. I'm going to be vulnerable at some point in my life, because we all are. So the good news is, I think the utilitarian argument, when you really have it out and you talk about the details of it, it falls apart, because most people are like, I don't want to live in a world where I have to always be the strongest, because then I get to set the rules.
That's a really good...
in my life, I know I'm going to not always be strong. And as a woman, I mean, that's also very sexist, the utilitarian, because women naturally are physiologically overall, at large, weaker than men. And we are the ones who carry and bear children, naturally speaking anyways. And that puts us in a weaker, more dependent position. And so, it's also predominantly a sexist position, because
I don't
really
care. I don't care. I'll be sexist then. Like, that's the thing. If atheism's true, then I don't give a crap if I offend you or if I subjugate you.
Well, good luck making friends, I'll just tell you.
That's a really... No, but I think it's an excellent point. What you're doing is appealing to self-interest. I mean, this is kind of what I do when I go and give talks on pornography to high schools. I'm like, okay, here's why it's immoral. People aren't usually interested. I'm like, okay, here's why your penis might stop working if you get addicted to it. And they're like, all right, now I'm open to the argument. And
and
often
also, here's why you might not have your dream girl might not want to be with you.
Yeah, exactly. But these self-interested reasons often open up to more altruistic reasons. So I think it's a good approach, what you've just shared there.
Well, and I don't think self-interest is inherently wrong, in the sense that we're called to our dignity. We are called to see our own dignity and to want to have our own dignity protected. That's not a bad thing. I think that's a Christian ideal, actually. That we have dignity. That's why Gianna Beretta Molla, that's why, Saint Agnes and some of the saints, they didn't want to be raped, and they actually would die rather than be raped because they had so much self-interest to not be raped. They had so much self-interest for their own dignity and their own virginity in that way. So I think the secular language of self-interest. I mean, yes, it is possible to be selfish, and that's, I think, a little different. But in the context you're speaking of it in, I think, the desire to not want to be killed unjustly, to want people to respect you and your body and your sex, your sex and your dignity. I don't think these are bad things. These are Christian things. These are, ideals that our faith professes.
That's a really good distinction. Thanks for bringing that up between self-interestedness and selfishness. Yeah.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.